When people think about virtual reality today, they picture sleek headsets, motion tracking, full color worlds, and the promise of stepping inside a game. It feels modern, cutting edge, and very much like something that belongs to the last decade. But the idea of virtual reality didn't just pop into existence with the Oculus or PlayStation VR. Long before VR became something you could reasonably own, companies were already experimenting with what immersion could mean. And strangely enough, one of the boldest and most infamous attempts came from Nintendo in the mid 1990s with a console that many people barely remember actually existed, the Virtual Boy. At first glance, the Virtual Boy almost feels like a joke. It is remembered as that red and black thing that hurt your eyes, made you hunch over a table, and disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Even Nintendo themselves rarely acknowledge it. But when you strip away the memes and the reputation, you're left with a genuinely interesting question. Was the Virtual Boy actually virtual reality? Or was it something else entirely that just got mislabeled and misunderstood? To answer that, we need to look at what Nintendo was trying to do in the first place. In the early 1990s, virtual reality was more of a buzzword than a clearly defined product category. VR was something you saw in sci fi movies, in research labs, or in massive arcade machines that promised immersion but rarely delivered anything practical. The technology simply wasn't ready for home use in the way people imagined. Nintendo, however, had a long history of taking unconventional ideas and turning them into successful consumer products, and they wanted to explore 3D gaming in a way that felt new without relying on cutting edge, expensive hardware. This is where Gunpei Yokoi comes into the story. Yokoi was one of Nintendo's most influential designers, responsible for the Game and Watch line and most famously, the Game Boy. His design philosophy revolved around what he called lateral thinking with withered technology, which essentially meant using older, cheaper, well understood technology in clever ways instead of chasing the most advanced specs. The Virtual Boy was a direct extension of that mindset. Rather than trying to build a full virtual reality system, Nintendo focused on stereoscopic 3D, the idea of giving each eye a slightly different image to create a convincing sense of depth. Technically, the Virtual Boy was fascinating. Instead of traditional screens, it used arrays of red LEDs and a rapid oscillating mirror to project images directly into the player's eyes. This scanning method allowed the system to display sharp visuals at a time when flat panel displays were still impractical and expensive. Each eye saw its own image, offset just enough to trick the brain into perceiving depth. And here's the thing that often gets overlooked: the 3D effect actually worked extremely well. For many players, the sense of depth was impressive, even startling, especially considering this was 1995. However, this is where the distinction between 3D visuals and virtual reality becomes crucial. Virtual reality, as we generally understand it, is about more than just depth perception, it's about presence. It's about feeling like you're inside a space rather than just looking at one. Modern VR systems track your head movements, adjust the image in real time, and create a sense that the world exists all around you. The Virtual Boy didn't do that. The image was fixed. No matter how you moved your head, the perspective didn't change. You weren't inhabiting a virtual environment. You were peering into a stereoscopic display mounted on a stand. That physical design mattered a lot. The Virtual Boy wasn't something you strapped to your head and moved around in. It sat on a table, forcing you to lean forward and press your face into the viewer. This immediately created ergonomic problems. Long play sessions were uncomfortable, not just because of the visuals, but because of the posture the system demanded. Your neck carried the strain, and the experience never felt relaxed or natural. Even watching someone else use a Virtual Boy looked awkward, and that visual impression hurt the system more than Nintendo probably realized. Then there were the visuals themselves. The Virtual Boy's red and black color scheme has become legendary, and not in a good way. Nintendo didn't choose red because they wanted to. They chose it because red LEDs were the most cost effective option at the time. Other colors would have dramatically increased the price. From a technical standpoint, it made sense. From a consumer standpoint, it was a problem. The lack of color made games harder to pace visually, reduced variety, and contributed to eye strain for some players. Nintendo even included prominent warnings advising users to take frequent breaks and cautioning against extended play, which didn't exactly inspire confidence in the product. Software was another major issue. Nintendo consoles live and die by their games, and the Virtual Boy never had a chance to build momentum. The library was small, and development support dried up quickly once it became clear the system wasn't selling. That said, there were some genuinely strong titles. Wario Land for the Virtual Boy is often cited as one of the best games on the system, cleverly using depth to enhance platforming. Mario Tennis showed how 3D space could be used to improve gameplay clarity. Teleroboxer felt ambitious and futuristic. The problem wasn't quality so much as quantity and identity. Developers didn't know how to design specifically for the hardware, and Nintendo themselves seemed unsure what role the Virtual Boy was supposed to play in their lineup. Was it a home console, a portable system, an experimental side project? It tried to be all of those things, and it ended up excelling at none of them. On top of that, Nintendo rushed it to market. Internally, there were concerns that the system wasn't ready, but the company needed something to fill the gap between the Super Nintendo and the upcoming Nintendo 64. The Virtual Boy became that stopgap, and it paid the price. The result was one of the shortest lived consoles in gaming history. Released in 1995 and discontinued in 1996, the Virtual Boy barely had time to find an audience before it was gone. Commercially, it was a failure. Culturally, it became a punchline. But historically, it is more complicated than that. Looking back from today's perspective, it's hard not to see parallels between the Virtual Boy and modern VR. Comfort issues, still a thing. Motion sickness and eye strain, still debated. Developers struggling to figure out best practices, absolutely still happening. The Virtual Boy didn't fail because the idea of immersive 3D was inherently flawed. It failed because the technology, the design, and the expectations of the mid 1990s simply weren't aligned yet. So, was the Virtual Boy actually virtual reality? By today's standards, no. It lacked tracking, freedom of movement, and the sense of presence that defines modern VR. But it wasn't just a gimmick either. It was a legitimate experiment in immersion, a bold attempt to explore 3D gaming in a way few companies were willing to risk at the time. In that sense, it absolutely deserves a place in the family tree of virtual reality, not as a success story, but as an important evolutionary step. The Virtual Boy stands as a reminder that innovation didn't always look pretty, and that even failures can push an industry forward. It was awkward, uncomfortable, and commercially disastrous, but it was also daring, creative, and unmistakably Nintendo. And sometimes that's enough to make something worth remembering. If you enjoyed this deep dive and found it interesting, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you want to support the channel even further, check out my Patreon, where the latest exclusive is a review of Resident Evil 4 and a look at how that game completely changed the direction of the franchise. Until next time, game on.